an effort to be respectful of everybody's time, I wanted to go ahead and get started. So, my name is Gary Hill. I am the head of the benefits team here at Sterling. So, on behalf of our team and the rest of our firm, thanks for being here. We're excited to have you today. We know this is a topic that is of growing interest as people continue to lament and complain about increasing healthcare costs. So we thought this would be timely. There's certainly been a lot of publicity and news around healthcare costs the last 2 or 3 years. So hopefully you'll feel like this is an interactive discussion. We want to make sure that you've got an opportunity to ask any questions that you have. Don't be shy. I probably can't answer them, but David and Michael probably can, so hopefully we'll be able to address anything that you've got. Just as by way of housekeeping, a couple of items. We are going to distribute the presentation after the fact. We'll email it to you, so don't worry about that. This will be coming to you via email. We're also going to be recording it, so if you want to forward it on to someone else in your company that couldn't make it today, please feel free to share it with them. But thanks for being here. I also want to say thanks to Andrea Hollis, who's still outside trying to direct traffic, but thanks to Andrea for putting all this together. So we'll go ahead and jump in, and then I will introduce David and Michael and let them really kind of run with the meat of the presentation. But I really just want to sort of set the stage with kind of where we are today with healthcare, right? Self-insurance is more popular today than it's ever been. And there are a couple of reasons why. But if we look back to the world of healthcare, pre-healthcare reform, and where we are today, we've got 38.6% more companies are self-insured today than there were 3 years ago. Okay? So clearly there is momentum, not just in the mega large employers, 1,000+ size range. There's a lot of momentum, even in the 50 to 100 range. And so almost 40% more employers are self-insured today than they were 3 years ago, which I think is pretty interesting. And so what's driving that, right? The Affordable Care Act is a big part of that. There are some significant advantages with being self-insured from a fee or tax standpoint that the government has imposed on fully insured plans coming through healthcare reform that you get out of in the self-insured world. You also have significantly more proactive management of the expenses, right? Data transparency. If you really want to proactively manage what is probably your second or third biggest expense, depending on your industry, being self-insured is going to give you the tools, the information, and the ability to really manage that from a proactive standpoint. And then thirdly, control over plan design is really another key factor in why we see people moving into self-insured plans. Taking the data that you have in the spirit of wanting to proactively manage that, how do we tweak our plan to accomplish the goals, to drive the behavior, to educate our employees, to be better successful users of healthcare? How do we do all of that ultimately with the goal of controlling our costs on a long-term basis? So the environment has never been more appropriate for self-insured plans, as we've seen a tremendous amount of growth in that space. The government is really helping incentivize people to go that way, to the extent that the government helps incentivize anything. But they are allowing for some significant incentives to go down that path. And then just the flexibility and the desire to have more control, to be the master of your own domain, so to speak, to not be subject to all the state mandates that are out there today. Self-insurance is a really great option. So with that, I want to introduce David McCachern and Michael Tate. They're with a firm in Charlotte called Healthgram. They are great partners of ours here at Sterling. They live and breathe these self-insured plans every day. This is what they do. We lean on them a lot with our clients. We have probably 7 or 8 mutual clients that we partner with to help these firms manage their healthcare expense. And by and large, it's been a very successful partnership for us, and so wanted to give them an opportunity to come in and speak to that. David, I think, is going to do the bulk of the presentation. David is the COO with Healthgram. Has been in the business for a number of years and is a great resource. So we encourage you to ask questions. Don't be shy, don't be bashful, and hopefully everybody has an opportunity to walk away from this learning something about self-insured health plans. So thanks for being here.
Thanks, Gary. And the more this is a small enough room, the more this is a conversation, the better. This is not what I do every day, so I'm going to try to keep it at a real high level, not get into the weeds in terms of, thank you, sir, not get into the weeds in terms of self-funding. It'd be plenty of opportunity with Laura and with Trevor and Knox, Gary to follow up and ask questions as well after this. I have a tendency to talk fast, and this industry is bad about using acronyms, and we're also really bad about using different terms to describe the same thing. So when we're talking about self-funding, terms might come up like a stop loss, reinsurance, excess risk. Those are all the same thing, and I'm going to try and point those out when I get to them because it can be confusing. We're not consistent at all. And acronyms are going to pop up. I'm going to talk about a TPA. That's a third-party administrator, ASO, Administrative Services Only. I know what it means. Some of y'all might not. So if I use an acronym and I don't stop and explain what it is, feel free to stop me. How many of you have at least had conversations about see, I was getting ready to call it self-funding. Gary, the whole time he was talking, called it self-insured, self-funding, self-insured. Those are all the same thing. People had conversations about that, have a general understanding about it. Okay, that's good. Feel free to ask questions if I say something that doesn't jive with what you guys know. And I guess as we get started, the other thing I'm going to say, and I think this is forward, no magic dust, right? Not selling snake oil. When we talk about being self-insured, when we talk about being self-funded, it's an opportunity to put yourself in a position to win. It's about a platform that allows you to have some of the control, some of the flexibility that Gary mentioned. But if you do the same things with it that you've done in the past, you're going to have the same outcome. And I always use an analogy, and maybe it's a good place to start the conversation, because Gary said it, you can't manage your cost unless you manage your claims. And we're going to go into that in a little more detail. Whether you're fully insured or you're self-funded, you are self-insured. And let me back up. I'm going to stop doing that. So everybody understands it to be fully insured. I'm going to say self-insured because it is a continuum. When I say fully insured and self-funded, it makes it sound like it's two different things, and I'll explain that a bit more as we go through this. But I always start with the analogy. When I get in the car and I get ready to head to the store, my wife doesn't ask me how I'm going to pay for stuff, right? She asks me what I'm going to buy because it's what I'm buying that's driving my cost. So when we talk about, again, fully insured or self-insured, you're really talking about how you finance something, right? You can go to a store and you can pay for something with cash, which is sort of a self-funded model, or you can pay for it with a credit card. And a credit card basically takes the same animal and spreads it out over 12 months so that you can make sort of installment payments on it. But it's really going to be, like I said, about the platform because it's ultimately about managing your claims as a way of managing your costs. Gary, I'm not going to hit on a lot of these, but to your point, being self-insured, even a lot of the commercial carriers now have come out with products that look like self-insured products as a way of getting around some of the ACA regs, but at the end of the day, they operate just like they're fully insured. So the lines have been blurred a little bit by what they call level-funded products, different things. I'm going to talk about just purely fully insured versus purely self-insured because it makes the conversation easier. Just understand that there's a lot of animals in the middle, and folks may talk to you about them, but same concept. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this just because, Gary, you already hit this, but there's a lot of momentum around being self-insured for a number of different reasons. And a lot of this is going to be words, and I'm going to circle back to it. Some of the same things that Gary mentioned, greater opportunity for savings. You think about paying a premium on the fully insured side. There's winners and there's losers, but if there's winners, that money's staying with the carrier. So this is about putting yourself in a position where if you make good decisions about how you manage risk, or mitigate risk, how you manage exposure, you're putting yourself in a position where the benefits of that accrue to you versus accruing to a fully insured carrier. Any of you that have been in the fully insured world long enough know that rates generally go up it's very rare that they come down. You know, it's almost exclusively a one-way street. Increased control, transparency, we're going to come back to this in a big way, but you know, like I said, it's about managing your claims in order to manage your cost. If you've got a lot of diabetics, or you've got a lot of hypertensives, if you have a lot of folks that aren't medication adherent, you need to be managing that at the member level, or hiring somebody to manage that at the member level. Otherwise, your costs are just what they are, right? You're not managing the risk that's ultimately driving your expense. Plan design, we're going to come back to this a little bit. Flexible plan design. The one thing you need to know about self-insured plans is that they're subject to federal regulation, not state regulation. So when you're looking at fully insured plans, all of those have to be filed with the state. And for that reason, they're very packaged, right? You know, it's kind of a one-size-fits-all world. Here's the plan designs that we have, A through J, pick one. In a self-insured environment, it's not regulated by the state, regulated by ERISA, by the federal government, and you have ultimate flexibility in terms of plan design. We have probably 200 self-insured clients, and I can tell you that in that book of business, there's not one of them that has a plan design that's exactly like the other one. They're all customized based on the needs of that specific employer. So in terms of the internal goals, drivers you're trying to hit, you just have a lot more flexibility over the plan design in a lot of areas, not just as it relates to deductible, co-insurance, those type things, but we're going to talk about things like limitations, exclusions, definitions. There's a lot of tweaks you can make in the language. I always say good fences make good neighbors. There's a lot of things that you can't do in a fully insured world with limitations, exclusions, definitions that you can do in a self-insured environment. So those are the big drivers in terms of our advantages in terms of self-insured. Now, you know, I'm going to start here because anytime you talk about being self-insured, it scares a lot of people, right? You know, what if you have $1 million claim? What if you have a $2 million claim? Optum is one of the stop-loss carriers that we work with, and getting ready to explain what that means. I had a conversation with them last week. They've seen a $30 million claim, and they've seen a $20 million claim. So the numbers have gotten a whole lot bigger. And, you know, nobody sitting in this room would dare to raise their hand and say, I want to take the risk on that, right? We can absorb a $20 million claim. So the thing everybody needs to understand is don't let this scare you. Nobody, or there are very few clients out there, we have maybe one or two that are truly self-insured. So if you think about it as a continuum, you know, fully insured on this end where you're paying an insurance company 100% of the premium, laying off the risk, they take the wins, they take the losses. At the other end of the spectrum, somebody who is completely self-insured, and no matter what their claims are, they're absorbing those, whether it's a $200,000 claim or a $2 million claim. And again, nobody in the room in a position to accept that risk. So the two fundamental things you need to understand when we talk about being self-insured is that everybody basically is buying some kind of catastrophic protection that caps your exposure on an individual claim. And that's specific stop loss. 100% of the claim over and above a certain level, and you can pick how much risk you want to assume. So, you know, one client may buy a $20,000 specific, which means they're laying off the risk on every claim over $20,000. Another larger client with different cash flow issues. And again, a lot of it has to do with size, how much risk, pressure. Not going to be able to get into all that today, but another client may buy a $100,000 specific stop loss level. We've got clients that have specific stop loss levels up to $500,000. We've got one client that has $1 million stop loss policy. So they're taking the risk on the first $1 million, and then once the claim hits $1 million, that's getting laid off to an insurance company. And there are a lot of cash flow accommodations that can be built into these products so that the reimbursement is immediate. You know, back in the old days, if you had $1 million claim and a $50,000 specific, you continued to fund those claims above $50,000 and got reimbursed by the reinsurance carrier or stop loss carrier. Again, those are the exact same thing. But anymore, those can be advance funded. So from a cash flow perspective, Once you've paid out your, let's say you have a $50,000 specific, once you've paid that out, you're completely done. After that, it's 100% on the reinsurance carrier. The other thing that everybody buys, or just about everybody, again, the bigger groups, they may get away from it. Smaller groups, you're going to have it. But let's say nobody has a $100,000 claim, but some kind of pandemic hits, right? Bird flu. Everybody in your group has a $20,000 claim. So specific stop loss capture exposure on an individual claim, once it exceeds that amount, you're done. Aggregate stop loss for all the claims below your specific stop loss level, capture exposure on those claims. So there are two types of protection, one on an individual claimant and then one that protects the assets on the whole group for all claims below that specific stop loss level. Again, some folks in the room may have been familiar with that. Hated to digress and go into that kind of detail early on, but it's going to be hard for people to listen if we're up here talking about being self-insured and you've had a $1 million claim and you're thinking, there's no way in heck I would ever do that. You just need to know that there's shock absorbers. Generically, I'll call them that, and there's a lot of other shock absorbers that can be built into these products to help alleviate cash flow concerns, risk concerns, exposure concerns. Any questions on that? Anybody? Yes, sir.
So you're talking about setting up someone to insure you above a certain threshold, whatever you choose per person, and then you're looking at for the whole group. You'll be a separate number for that.
Two separate policies, two separate distinct policies. That's absolutely correct. You can purchase specific stop loss coverage without purchasing aggregate stop loss coverage.
So that's two different products.
Two totally different policies. Now, normally they're married together, and they go together. And we'll talk about why, but once you get comfortable with self-funding, or self-insured, you may choose to not carry aggregate coverage, because if you think about it, specific stop loss, if you set your specific stop loss level low enough, you take all the volatility out of your claims. So if you take, because really what's driving cost? I mean, everybody in this room is like most people. If you take a look at your population, 3 to 5% of your population is driving 50% of your spend. 10% of your population is driving about 80 to 90% of your spend. Well, if you take those fluctuations out by buying a relatively conservative specific stop loss level, a $30,000, $40,000 specific stop loss level, then for the claims below that, you take a lot of that volatility out. It becomes very, very predictable at that point, and aggregate stop loss coverage becomes more like sleep insurance. Very rare that you see an aggregate claim. The carriers don't charge a whole lot of money for it because there's very little risk there. But those are two separate and distinct contracts. You can buy specific stop loss coverage and not buy aggregate coverage. You cannot buy, as you would expect, you cannot buy aggregate coverage without having some sort of specific stop loss coverage, because there would just be too much pressure on the aggregate.
As an example too, I mean, we have around 175 employees enrolled on the health plan. We don't have aggregate coverage. All we have is specific coverage. So we just set the specific deductible. I believe it's a number around $40,000, and the same reasons David mentioned. It's that chance of having a large amount of claims from a large amount of people that's going to allow us to exceed the aggregate deductible is so low. We've been in this thing long enough to where there's no need for us to purchase it. And like David said, the reinsurance carriers, aggregate coverage, it's going to be around a $10 PDPM number. That just shows you where they price that type of risk, as opposed to specific coverage. So for that $40,000 deductible, now that's $100, $200 PDPM amount. So those are just the different risk levels you take into account when you're looking at something like that.
Right. And I'm not really using the slides that well. I apologize for that. I'll try to stick to those going forward. So when you understand it's just a continuum, fully insured to self-insured, and you understand that 80% of your spend, whether you choose to insure it, fully insure it, or self-insure it, 80% of your spend is your claims, and you understand that whether you're in a fully insured environment or a self-insured environment, again, this industry is really bad. If you're in a fully insured environment, they call it pooling. Everybody's heard the term pooling levels. In other words, when they look at your experience on the fully insured side, they're pulling out the anomalies also, right? There's a pool premium that you pay, and they're pulling out claims above a certain level. This is kind of what you end up with, right? You know, your fully insured premium, the way an insurance company builds it, they take your claims, because again, when you take out the anomalies, they get very predictable. They within reason, if you give me a 500 life group, within 1 or 2 points every year, I'm going to be able to tell you exactly what the claims are going to be, right? The bigger the group gets, the more statistically valid it gets, the more predictable it gets. They're taking your claims and they're using that as a starting point for building your premium. On top of your claims, they're building in their retention, which is their administrative expense for managing your plan, paying the claims, providing customer service, billing eligibility, everything they do. They're building in a pooling charge, which is like specific stop loss on the self-insured side. And that ultimately becomes your premium. And that's why I said earlier, if you don't manage your claims, then you can't manage your cost, because every year that math it's real simple. Now, you don't get data on the fully insured side, you don't have information, but in a self-insured world, you should never be guessing what your renewal is going to be, right? You get ag reports every month, and ag reports are really just an accounting of how the plan's running. And based on that ag report, any given month, year to date, because you know they're taking your claims, they're adding trend, medical trend, whatever medical trend is, 4, 5%, 8%, and that's going to become the claim projection, retention, and pulling on top of that. You ought to know exactly what your rate increase is going to be, right? Very simple formula. You can do the math, and you ought to be within a point of 2 of where your renewal is going to be. You just don't get the data to be able to do that on the fully insured side. And that's why I go back to, really what you're talking about is how you're financing something. If you think about it on the fully insured side, all those same components exist. You're just giving it to the insurance company as one lump sum premium, and then they're doing the accounting on the back end, and there's either something left or there's not, and whatever that is accrues to them. In a self-insured environment, you have a lot more visibility, you have the information, versus paying that entire premium into an insurance company. You're really just paying in administrative fees, and in a self-insured environment, that administrative component, for our book of business, our administrative fees average about 3.5% of our clients spend. In a fully insured environment, and I'm not going to sit here and tell you that this is a win as far as being self-insured. There's some minor victories, but the real opportunity is in the platform. But our administrative expenses run about 3.5%. ACA, I think, mandated like a 15% number on the insurance company side. So as a general rule, their retention, which is administration, is going to be closer to a 15% number. So we're much more, so we're a TPA, a third-party administrator. When you go self-insured, probably should have said this on the front end, you can hire different types of organizations to manage your plan. A TPA, a third-party administrator, not an insurance company, accepts no risk, does everything that an insurance company does in terms of managing the plan, processes claims, handles customer service, eligibility, billing, utilization review, case management, disease management programs, all of those things, but in a much smaller, lighter, less expensive platform. And that's what third-party administrators are good at, right? Administration. You look at an insurance company, on the insurance company side, if you wanted to go self-insured with an insurance company, they would call it an ASO contract, administrative services only. It's the exact same thing, except if you look at insurance companies as a general rule, and I'm biased, of course, they're a little more bloated, they're a little more bureaucratic, they're not as light on their feet, they're not as responsive, and even if you self-insure something on the carrier side, they're still trying to put you in their box, right? Because they're doing things for the masses, and they still try to get you to stick to their filed plans, and they don't have a lot of the flexibility on the limitations, exclusions, those type of things that we're going to talk about. So a couple of different options in terms of how you approach it from an administrative perspective.
I think the important piece to add too is just employee facing, what your employees would experience, whether TPA, ASO carrier, or fully insured. It's going to look the same to them for the most part. They have the portals they're going to be able to access. Of course, that depends on who you're choosing, but in terms of an ID card and their access to doctors, pharmacy, all those things, majority of the time, they're not going to know if they're self-funded or if they're fully insured. It's all the same to employees. Like David said, it's really just the funding on the backside is the biggest difference. And then I would say the hands-on approach, depending on who you'd be working with on the self-funded angle, who's going to be contacting your members, what the engagement's like, because there are more opportunities to control claims. The big portion being that claims expense, the variable costs, and that's all dependent on who you're working with on the self-funded side.
It will look different though. I mean, one of the selling points in gaining employees is hey, we've got X insurance. We've
got McDonald's.
Whatever it is. Usually that name carries clout with people that don't know self-insurance. And when you're self-insured, you're not going to have something like that to be able to tell them. You're basically telling them we insure ourselves, right? So
if you're smart, you tell them that. We do have some clients, to Michael's point, that sort of mask that from their members. They don't tell them they're self-insured because they don't want to put themselves in a position where a member feels like they can come to them and the employer has some leeway, latitude in terms of a claim determination. But yeah, people like McDonald's. I mean, I get it. That's the biggest thing that we fight every single day. Employees walk in, they don't ask you if you have health insurance coverage. They ask you if you have Blue Cross, right? It's almost synonymous.
And let me add, so that's a great question. It doesn't mean that you don't have a network of providers that your employees access. In fact, most of the time, it's going to be one of the 3 or 4 biggest ones that are out there today. So
Blue Cross.
You're going to choose which network you want to partner with. So maybe you want to partner with Cigna, right, or UHC. So you still use that network. So the card still says UHC on it, because that's the network. It would have a Healthgram on it and a UHC on it. So you have that comfort of knowing, okay, Dr. Jones, or more importantly, my wife's doctor, is still in the network, right? I'm not on this wild, wild west where I go to any doctor I want to go to and I've got to negotiate pricing. You're renting, for lack of a better term, access to those established insurance company networks that your employees can tap into.
So your employee still carries an insurance card that has a big name on it?
Yep, absolutely.
How does that rental fee, where is it on the stack of that?
Administration.
part of the
It's a per employee. It's not part of the 3.5%. Because it depends on the network. Maybe that adds another half a point. Some of the local, I'll call them regional networks, because there are local networks, there are statewide networks, there are regional networks, and then there's national networks. Depending upon what you're tapping into will dictate that fee to a certain extent. It's a number that'll run anywhere from, say, $3 per employee per month to rent a network up to, Cigna and United are pretty proud of their stuff, right? You got to pay for some advertising, you got to pay for the name. A rental network from like a Cigna is more, instead of a $3 number, it's like a $13 number. But still, it's a fixed per employee per month. And again, I don't even want to go too far down that street, but yeah, you're paying a PEPM for that. Small tenths of a point, of your total spend.
So when you go to the doctor and you put that card down in front of the doctor, that whatever number is on that card tells them to call to get in touch with the third-party administrator rather than the name of the card. Is that the way that works?
No, the card. They understand that Healthgram in this case, and I'm not really trying. I want to say this out loud. I'm not trying to sell anybody on using a TPA or use an administrative services only contract from an insurance carrier. And as you can tell, I'm not really trying to sell anybody on being self-funded. I'm biased in that regard. I think it's the right platform. If you look at it in any given year, you may win or you may lose. If you look at it over a 5 to 10 year period, you're going to win every time being self-insured, every single time. And I'm definitely not trying to sell Healthgram. But yes, the way it works is, in our case, Healthgram would be on one side of the card with certain EDI numbers, electronic data interchange numbers, because it's all about numbers driving the healthcare machine anymore. That was part of ACA, is all this core connectivity. Our systems are connected with provider systems. They have real-time access to eligibility, real-time access to claims information. The EDI number or the identifier on the sickness side or the Blue Cross side is going to be a different number, and they know that's who the network is. And that really, it's important to them because it drives the pricing, right? They need to know what to expect in terms of reimbursement. But yes, they know that you're with Cigna, they know that you're with Blue Cross, they know that you're with United. All that's seamless to your members. They don't even, to Michael's point, and from a workload perspective, from an HR perspective, you can set up a self-insured plan and spend absolutely no more time on it than you currently spend on your fully insured plan. It's no more work. It would feel exactly the same. It would look exactly the same. There would be 1 or 2 extra steps because instead of just paying a monthly invoice, get your premiums and giving all your money to a carrier, you're paying a fixed invoice for administration and stop loss, and then you're taking the rest of the money, the other 80% of the money, and it stays with you. It stays in general funds until it's needed to fund a claim. And I forget where I was going with that, but at any rate, you just pay the fixed cost invoice, and then we would bill you. The extra step was every week you get a check detail report that shows you the claims we've processed, and you fund that at the end of the week. But I would tell you, if you do that, and it's exactly that, right? So I started off by saying Mary doesn't care, you know, when I go to the store, she doesn't ask me how I'm paying for it. Are you paying for it with cash, or are you paying for it with a credit card? That's what we're talking about here, because all the fully insured number does, it's like putting it on a credit card. They know what the spend's going to be, and versus you having, you know, months that look like this, some big months, some little months, they just level it out, and you pay 12 equal monthly installments. So regardless of how you fund it, you know, funding is just window dressing, right? That's just how you're paying for it. If you're having conversations and somebody comes in and says, you ought to self-fund your medical plan or self-insure your medical plan, and they think that's the answer, way wrong, right? You know, because all you're doing is changing how you pay for it. It's about what you do with a self-insured platform, the decisions you make, how you engage your members in order to get them to be better consumers, take better care of themselves. That's what it's all about. You know, so just talking about how to fund it, there's no magic in that, and you're not going to win or lose on funding, if that makes sense.
Not to sidetrack you, I'm just curious about, we've been talking about medical this whole time, if there's a dental, all that's available as well for self-funding.
And that's easy. Yeah, you don't have to buy stop loss on dental claims. You know, your dental max is probably $1,000, right? You know, it's capped by definition. So we would still provide the administrative services, process all the dental claims. You could have a dental network or not. All the vision claims, you could have a network or not. But you don't have to worry about reinsurance, stop loss, none of that stuff.
About life, short-term, long-term disabilities, things like that.
You know, those are all fully insured. If you were Bank of America, they changed their name. Anyway, if you're Boeing, you may self-fund your life insurance, you may self-fund your long-term disability coverage, but the volatility is ginormous on that side, and it's just not conducive to self-insuring that.
Yeah, and just to jump in there, the cost to transfer that risk to a fully insured carrier is so low on the life insurance side. There's not the opportunity to save money. You may see on the disability side, you may see some employers do like a salary continuation program that would be sort of a comparable self-insured on a disability side. But again, the cost to transfer that risk is generally so cheap, it's not worth it. The real opportunity is going to be on the medical side. The dental side is going to be very predictable, dollars in, dollars out. Again, it's a defined benefit, right? $1,000 annual max, typically. Not a lot of opportunity to save a ton of money. The opportunity is on the medical side where you can really influence behavior.
That said, on the dental side, if you're going to self-insure your medical platform, unless it's 100% contributory, you don't want to have any risk or any exposure on it, you just want the employees to pay for it, you make it available. But if you have a dental plan and you've got some money in it, because there isn't a lot of volatility, and because it's very predictable, right? It becomes extraordinarily predictable. You're better off self-insuring that because you're going to make money on it every year versus paying a fully insured premium on it. Yeah. This unbundles, to your question, unbundles some of the fixed costs a little bit more. We're lumping a lot of things together when we talk about administration. But all the services that you would normally expect in a fully insured environment, you would expect a carrier to provide, whether it's COBRA, whether it's HSA administration, whether it's Flex administration, the medical management piece, whether you're talking about utilization management, case management. We run a lot of disease management programs where we're looking at risk mitigation strategies in terms of engaging members with chronic diseases. All of those things that you would normally expect to come from an insurance company, we provide, or we have, or Sterling has, vendors that we engage to provide those services. So you're not losing anything. Everything just becomes a lot more visible to you, and you have more levers that you can pull. One of the things ACA did was it dramatically reduced the levers, the opportunities that you have to pull in order to control your risk and exposure on the fully insured side. You know, it's got to be affordable. It's got to meet ACA guidelines in terms of out-of-pockets, all those things. So how are you going to manage this if you have no flexibility in terms of cost and no flexibility in terms of plan design? And we'll segue into that a little bit because there are still some huge opportunities, and a lot of it revolves around member engagement, right? That's really that's really where the rubber hits the road. Because if you think about it, you know, and this is a big one. Think about what you asked about the ID card. Think about what your ID card is, right? It's a credit card. You're giving every one of your members, every single employee, and every one of their family members a credit card that they're carrying around. And it's got with ACA, it now has an unlimited maximum on it. So it could be a $500 expense, or it could be a $50 million expense that they're charging on your credit card. You're giving them this credit card, but you're not there making any decisions or engaged with them making any decisions about what they charge on that credit card at the time they charge it. You can make some decisions and you can rearrange the deck chairs a little bit in terms of plan design, but you're not there making that decision with them. They're not making a decision about what they charge on that credit card. And the provider community that is making a decision about what gets charged on that credit card has no clue on cost. No clue. You talk about a colonoscopy, you can have same doctor, same procedure, just what table you're laying on. It could cost $600 or it could cost $6,000. And that's really where you're going to win. You know, it's two things. It's engaging members in terms of their chronic conditions and helping them take better care of themselves. That's more of a long-term play. The shorter-term play is engaging your members as consumers because, you know, all the co-pays, all the distractions of third-party payer and the lack of linkage. We have folks out there that have no clue how to be consumers as it relates to medical care. There's no transparency. There's no information. They don't know those opportunities exist. We had a client in Charlotte. We run some programs where we provide some visibility, transparency, and some resources around helping members understand what their opportunity is. So just give you an example. Lady needed a knee replacement, and it's how convoluted the system is, right? Lady needed a knee replacement and had planned this for some time, you know, going to be out of work, worked with her employer to make sure, you know, job, everything, child care, the whole 9 yards. Even though we run utilization management programs, pre-certification, this had been planned for 4 to 6 weeks. You know, when we got the call to let us know that this was going to happen, the day before at 4:30 in the afternoon. And you can imagine the emotional energy that's built into it at that point and how difficult it is to change what somebody's bought into at that point. Well, so D'Alessandro, who's one of the Panthers doctors, you know, great doctor, you know, up in Charlotte, was going to be the one doing the work. So absolutely the right doctor. D'Alessandro has privileges in 2 different locations. He can do the surgery Monday, Wednesday, and Friday here. He can do it Tuesday and Thursday here. She had planned to have it done on Wednesday. She already had her child care lined up. We got in touch with her, let her know that if she just moved less than a half a mile down the street, half a mile down the road, same doctor, that was going to save that employer $35,000. Then that happens every single day. There are that kind of opportunities out there, but you got to have data and you got to have an engaged partner to get there. We talked to her. She was so emotionally committed to it that she wasn't willing to let go. And I get it, right? You know, I get it. Wasn't willing to let go. we made contact with the employer, hey, we've got this situation. We had rewards built in, because we're giving incentives to people to use green light providers. We basically ranked them, red, yellow, green, right? You go to red, yellow, we're going to send you an alert saying you're going the wrong place, there's an opportunity to do this somewhere less expensively. You go to green, you get a reward. So there were rewards built into that already. We reached out, called the employer, and said, hey, this is the situation. Basically, how much money are you willing to, and again, I don't want to scare anybody that we're going to get into conversations like this daily, but you have to be engaged to be able to manage this stuff, right? I mean, that's what it's all about. How much money are you willing to throw at this to try and save $35,000? And we got up to a number, and I won't get into the details, but it became apparent that it wasn't going to happen. But she told a friend, and that friend called us the next day. He was getting ready to have hip replacement, and we were able to work with her and get her to a much better spot for her financially and for that employer financially. But every time we do that, we learn, right? So now we're looking for precursor events. So nobody has a knee cut on until they have an MRI. So if somebody has an MRI done, we're reaching out to them. So it's at the time they're contemplating care, building a relationship with them, trying to make sure we walk them through the right door and that the right things get charged on that credit card that you handed your member. And that's really what it takes to, now that sounds daunting and it sounds like a lot of engagement on your part. You just got to hire the right partner. You got to hire somebody that's, you just got to hire an engaged partner, right? Because there's huge opportunity in healthcare. People don't get it. We're still having conversations, and I'm digressing bad.
What is your scale game? Why would you care whether or not they spend $35,000? What motivates you to save the company money?
We live and die on that, right? I'm not an insurance company. We take no risk. I can't buy your business. An insurance company.
If you had to call the insurance, if you had to call the employer, you would have never known there was an opportunity to save money.
Correct.
So you got to have some incentive to save money. Right?
We're getting paid. That's what I'm saying. We live and die on your PEPM, right? What's your per employee or PEPY, per employee per year? What your cost is, we live and die on that, right? That's what we're managing to. We're not an insurance company. And it's happened to every single one of you in this room. Anybody ever had their business bought by an insurance company? You knew it was ridiculous premium, it was too low, you were facing a 30% increase, and somebody came in at 10% below current. We can't do that. We sell services. Every bit of our fee is a per employee per month. That's how we get paid. We get paid a per employee per month to run those programs. We just take healthcare management very seriously. All we do is, and this is going to sound like an advertisement, but it's the difference between a TPA and an insurance company. We don't sell life insurance. We don't sell disability. We don't sell 401k. We don't do fully insured plans. We serve one animal, and that animal is self-insured employers who want to engage in some better practices as it relates and have more information and more control and more engagement in their healthcare dollars. And I don't know if that's...
Yeah, no.
And how would that work is in a regional or a national platform? Is that something, you're able to provide that service whether the employees in Tennessee or the employees in South Florida?
Again, let's say we're in the national, well, everybody knows Sunbelt. Sunbelt Rentals, you see the green trucks. Can't go by a construction site without seeing, a lift or something, a tractor. Sunbelt's one of our clients. They're in all 50 states. They use Cigna, so it's a national network. All the breadth, all the depth that you would expect to get from a commercial carrier, you just got somebody more engaged managing the program.
Okay.
Yeah. They're going to let the machine run more. We don't really believe in letting the machine run. Letting the machine run will get you in trouble, because that's where I was going a minute ago. A lot of the conversations are still around, if you look at Aetna, Cigna, United, Blue Cross, people are still having conversations around, okay, tell me what your aggregate average discount is. Self-reported. What's your aggregate average discount? And if you go through a repricing analysis and you send it to the BUCAs, that's what I'm going to call those four, Blue Cross, United, Cigna, Aetna, you send it to the BUCAs, you're going to get back, this one's going to be at 48% average discount, this one's going to be at 51, this one's going to be at 49. So you're talking about 2 or 3 or 4% spread. Underneath that aggregate 50% discount, there's a 10,000% difference in the cost of services based on which table you're laying on. And nobody's having conversations about that stuff.
Well, does the employer have the ability, like in this situation, this woman wanted a Cadillac, right?
She didn't want a Cadillac, she just didn't know any better, and she was emotionally invested at that point. Yeah, the doctor said, go here.
She wanted the best named doctor in the city.
She could have kept the
There
same
are other
doctor.
doctors that could have done just as good a job, right? That would have been Chevrolet.
It was the same
No,
doctor.
it was the same doctor. She didn't even have to change
I
doctors, she just
understand
had
that
to change
situation,
beds.
but could you, can the employer have control over which doctor they choose, or which, I mean, in other words, instead of going to the Cadillac, which costs this much, it's the same.
Yes, absolutely. That's the ranking I was talking about. So if you look at the universe of providers, there's transparency tools out there. I don't know if you're a car guy, but think about Kelley Blue Book, right? You want to buy a car. Consumerism exists almost everywhere except in healthcare. You want to buy a car, you go online, you do your research, you see how much it costs, you understand what a fair price is, you understand what you're paying, you make intelligent decisions. She had no visibility, on the price, right?
But she wants the best because it didn't cost her a freaking dime, right?
She didn't know, right? I don't want to pick
She
on her
would want
because
the
she
best
didn't know.
regardless, because it didn't cost her any more money to go to the best.
So that, I'll tell you, that's a good point. Her out-of-pocket was the same regardless. That's what ACA mandated. So her out-of-pocket was $6,000 no matter what happened. So at that point, yes, she did not care where she went. But so if you look at every single procedure, whether it's an MRI or a CAT scan, or whether it's a knee replacement or a hip replacement or a colonoscopy, market basket of services, and there's different subsets of that market basket. Let's call some of them shoppable procedures. Some of them aren't necessarily shoppable because they're emergent, right? Somebody has a heart attack, somebody was in an automobile accident, whatever. But if you're talking about shoppable procedures, every one of your members can go online, if they're a client of ours, and they can see who the red light, yellow light, and green light providers are. And if they use if you bought that program from us, if they use a green light provider, they're going to get a reward. Now the problem with that is the same problem you have with any self-service tool. I don't care if it's a 24-hour nurse line or a self-service transparency tool like what I'm talking about, the hit rates are abysmally low, right? 3 to 5%, nothing. So what you need is a partner that has taken one of those transparency tools, this is going to sound like an advertisement as well, and embedded it in a service. So what we're doing is, to your point, so somebody pre-certifies something, they're going to a red or yellow light facility, not just letting that happen, we're sending alerts to the member, we're also sending an alert to an advisor's picking up the phone, calling that member, trying to educate them on the opportunity, help them understand what the rewards are and how it can help them save money. From a benefit perspective, you're exactly right, it's too nebulous for a member. They don't understand, well, I could save money because my 20% is going to be less. They don't connect with that. All they know is it cost them something. So the rewards, our recommendation would be the rewards need to be outside of the plan. You can accomplish a whole lot more by giving them a $25 or a $50 cash card than you can by telling them their 20% is going to be of a smaller number, if they go here than if they go here, right? So you provide them tangible, concrete, incremental, not big number rewards, and we're driving it, the incentives are driving it, all of that stuff being linked up is what makes it work.
Yeah, and I was just going.
Sorry.
That's all right. That's where I was going. Is the rewards are a key part of that, right? And it could be as simple as a deductible credit, right? But to David's point, the employee may respond much better to an incentive totally outside of the medical plans. Maybe it's a $250 check. Who knows what it is? But the macro level point is, unless you have the data and the ability to sort of manage that, the employee is going to make the wrong decision every time because they're spending your money at the end of the day, right? So you asked something early on. I think it was you, Norm. Do you tell the employees that you're self-insured? I'd say we have 75% of our employers tell their employees, hey, we're self-insured. Let me tell you how this is going to go. This is an attempt for us to maintain and control our costs going forward. We're all in this together. Your behavior matters. If you're irresponsible, our premiums are going to go up, right? Then you've got 25% of the employers that say, I don't want my employees to know. Because if they know we're self-insured, they're going to go spend my money because they're bitter or whatever it is. So you really have to kind of know your population. But most of our clients say, hey, we're all in this together, gang, and we're going to do, this is, in our opinion, the best way to manage this expense going forward. And if we're all successful, we're going to control our costs, right? And that's going to mean maybe no increases or 1% increases, whatever that may be. But giving them that information to know that there's something in it for them helps.
I think it's important.
I've got one client that says, look guys, the bank account that pays your bonuses is the bank account that pays our healthcare claims.
And I love linking it to profit sharing. I mean, it's a finite resource, right? You only have X amount of money you're going to spend on wages and compensation. If this one goes up, you got less over here to contribute to everything.
Yeah, and I mean, and that's the message, right? I mean, at the end of the day, if there's money left over, we can share this back to you through bonuses or through reduced premiums, whatever it may be. But if you're being irresponsible and buying something that is not the most cost-effective thing for you or the company, it all comes out of the same pie.
Correct, and that's really this, right? Because, this is the funding thing, right? Fully insured, you pay your premiums into a big black box. You have no idea what happens after that. Some claims expense, some pulling charges, some admin fees come out. In a self-funded environment, same thing. Instead of paying it to an insurance company, you basically take your premium, pay it to yourself. Out of that box comes the pulling charge and administrative expenses. Those are fixed costs. And then to the extent you manage that number better, which is that 80% piece of the pie, that savings accrues to you and not to an insurance company. And the way that savings accrues to you, and I'm going to skip around because we just get into actionable information at the individual level. So there's a lot of things you can do. We talk about having some, from a financial perspective, you can talk about having somebody change a setting of care, right? And there's significant amount of money to be saved there. There's also a significant amount of money that can be saved in running impactful, because there's a lot of noise around disease management. What does it really mean? What's the return on investment? It's hard to measure. Some of these people have worked hard for 20 or 30 years on their heart attacks, and they're going to enjoy them, right? I mean, you're just not going to change everybody's behavior. They're not going to eat their broccoli. They don't want to. So those are more long-term. Shorter term, there's also some fences that you can put up around your plan. Guarantee you, if every one of you looked at your plan document, and this is going to sound harsh, right? But I'm just giving you an example. And we saw this during the financial meltdown just a few years back. People are moonlighting, right? We got a lot of blue-collar industry, and people are painting houses on the weekend, or they're doing this or they're doing that. Who knows what they're doing? Every single one of your plan documents says if it's covered by workers' comp, it's not covered under our plan. But what if the person's not carrying workers' comp, right? Then it is covered under your plan. What about a definition, a limitation, and exclusion that says if you're working for wages or profit? Because do you want your health plan to be somebody else's workers' comp coverage? And I'm not saying do that, but there's 100 little things like that you need to be making decisions on, that you have to be making decisions on, that are very personal, and you don't get those choices when you're working with an insurance company, right? They're not even going to have this conversation with you. But some of you might say, I mean, we've had people driving trucks, right? Second jobs, doing things where they're using the employee. North Carolina, more familiar with that. One or two people. Good idea to carry workers' comp, but it's not required by law, so they don't. They use your health plan. You need to be having conversations about those things. You need to be making intelligent decisions about how you want to handle that stuff on the front end. If there was one thing you could do right, if you could buy, Blue Cross, beat on your chest, 800-pound gorilla, we got the best discounts, right? If that was the answer, everybody'd be doing it. And our answer is a little bit more complicated. You got to get more engaged, and there's 100 little things that you have to do right in order to win at this. But those are the opportunities that you need to be having conversations around, not shopping this stuff once a year. I said before, you could do the same thing, no more work in a self-insured environment than what you have on the fully insured side. Don't do it, right? If you're not going to pay attention to it, if you're not going to get engaged, if you're not going to make some of these decisions, then let somebody else take the risk. If you want to control this and you want to be in the driver's seat, and you want to have some flexibility, then self-insured is where you need to be, and you're going to win all day long. And I'll end there. I got a couple more slides. I'm way over time.
Yeah, I think it's great.
I'm way over time. We did include, there's some other.
Speak to that real quick.
Speak to that real quick? Okay. So, just, there's a lot, I'm talking about the platform, and again, because 80% of the pie is claims, that's what I'm focusing on, the platform and your opportunity to manage your risk from a claim perspective, better manage your population and your risk. But there's a whole lot of little wins. Because it's not regulated by the state, you don't have to pay state premium taxes, right? So there's 2% here, there's 4% there, there's 3% here, and all that stuff adds up. So there's a win in being self-insured regardless, but the bigger opportunity is some of this other stuff that we're talking about, and I don't know if that's what you meant.
Yeah, no, that was perfect. I just wanted to touch on that. There's some low-hanging fruit here, right? I mean, there are a couple of things that are going to be easier to grab hold of as you get comfortable with it. And when you're assessing, okay, what are the financial impacts here? First off, I would say anything, when you're trying to make the transition, you're thinking about the transition, it's really important, as David alluded to, this is not a one-year decision, right? This is at a minimum, a 3 to 5 year decision when you make that first look. And you got to factor that in. So when you're doing the analysis, you got to price it as though you're going to do this for a couple of years, because there are some things that occur in year 2, the plan matures, and some things happen that you want to make sure you factor it in so you're not caught off guard. But 8 out of 10 times, I mean, I've seen 2 clients in the 10 years I've been here at Sterling. We've had 2 clients hit the aggregate stop loss. That's it. It just doesn't happen. It becomes predictable. You're going to win 8 out of 10 years. And you got to be patient. If you have a bad year the first year for some reason, you got to hang with it. But do we have any questions?
Are there any mandates that sort of self-funded insurers sort of routinely shed that are impactful? That the state puts on, whether it be Georgia or someplace else, that you can do away with that impactful.
So I think this is kind of weird. So let's take gastric bypass, for example.
Right.
Massachusetts requires it. It's not required here in Georgia, but if you want to add it, you can. It's between 1.5% to 2% of premium. Okay? Just for that one covered service that Massachusetts mandates you have in your plan, 2 points. Self-insured plans are regulated at an ERISA level, federal level. They're outside of those state mandates. So they're absolutely those things that you do comply with in a fully insured world that you don't necessarily have to comply with in a self-insured world.
Is there anything politically afoot that could stop self-insurance or directly affect the way that self-insurance would work? Like, you hear people talk about appealing a law and so let's say they got appealed or didn't get appealed. Is that going to change what we do in this regard?
I can't think of anything. I would almost go the other way and say
the accelerator pedal is being mashed right now.
Yeah, there's a greater likelihood that they're going to take away the tax deductibility of the premiums, right? And so if that tax incentive goes away, then in my mind this is more attractive because I've really got to be that much more diligent in managing my care and educating employees on how to be the most efficient consumer they can be. But I can't think of anything offhand.
There's not going to be a mandate to use a carrier versus being self-insured it's anywhere but.
The only thing I've seen is some states, I don't think this is in the Southeast, and of course if your cited state is Georgia, North Carolina, South Carolina, you'd be fine, but some of these states, maybe it was Colorado, Utah, were looking at regulating the specific deductible, and that was all for the reason of keeping these smaller companies from exploring self-funding, because we are seeing a shift to more companies self-funding to take advantage of the cost controls. So they were saying, you have to have a minimum specific deductible of $30,000 or $40,000. You can't go lower than that. So that would exclude some of these companies that, let's say, are between 50 and 100 employees from really exploring self-funding, just because that spec deductible would be too high, too much risk for them to take on. That's all I've seen along those lines.
Yeah, I would say at some point it kind of becomes, you think about specific stop loss coverage, it's catastrophic coverage by definition. That's you're laying off that risk. When a normal delivery hits your spec level, that's not catastrophic coverage, right? That's almost like a hybrid fully insured kind of thing. So
yeah,
they're just, And going back to your question too, and I usually say this, I don't think I said it at the beginning, we're having a conversation about fully insured, self-insured. I think everybody in this room gets this. Whether you're fully insured or you're self-insured, you're self-insured. You're going to pay an insurance company enough money to cover your claims plus their cost of doing business. Well, they are not, plus some. You are not going to get around that. You may get in their pocket in any given year, but you're paying your claims. Again, all they're doing is leveling the funding out. It's like Georgia Power and Light, right? You can have a high power bill in the summer, low in the fall, high in the winter, low in the spring, or you can do load leveling. And they'll estimate what the expense is going to be, and you can pay them 12 equal monthly installments. That's what you're doing with an insurance company.
Yeah,
It's just
when it comes to renewal, they're going to look at what your claim history is.
That's right, a reset. It's going to be a reset, correct?
And for most people, they're not going to price that renewal on 100% of your credibility. So if you've been running well, they're still going to throw in some manual cost to say, to help push the rate up. So that's exactly right. You may get in their pocket one year, but if you blow it up, they're going to come right back and take it on the renewal.
They're going to win. Over 2-3 years, they're going to win every single time. They are not in business to lose money. Their shareholders don't appreciate that. They're going to come out ahead.
So if you're in one of the payer networks, say United, that includes all the ancillary services. There's nothing that would jump up and say, well, no, you're covered for this network of doctors, but you don't get prescription pricing or
No, the pharmacy network is different than the medical network. Like Express Scripts is, I think they cover 40% of all Americans. We use Express Scripts as a general rule as the PBM, Pharmacy Benefit Manager, but you're tapping into their network. You're tapping into Cigna's network, so they're broad national networks, correct?
So there would be no medical services that you would pay usual and customary, just the highest fee structure for it?
No. That's another thing we didn't talk about. A lot of insurance companies, when you're talking about out-of-network, they apply something called reasonable and customary. Nothing reasonable and nothing customary about reasonable and customary, right? It's just a reflection of charges within a zip code. The other thing that you can do in a self-insured environment, you have a lot more control over what that out-of-network fee schedule is. We use a Medicare Plus model that we call max plan allowance that is in line with what you would expect to pay in a network setting, because somebody goes out of network, they're going to get penalized, but you may get penalized, right? So this provider over here, this provider who's in network, the original charge was $30,000. It was a 50% discount, so now it's $15,000. Let's say the member's share of that was $1,000 through deductibles, co-insurance, whatever. You paid $14,000. Over here, provider out of network charged $30,000. Reasonable and customary, $28,000. It's going to be some number close to the bill charge. It's not much of a cut at all. Yeah, you're paying instead of 80%, paying 60%, but the 60% you're paying on is of a so much bigger number that you end up paying more out of network than what you would have paid in network. So putting in, that again goes back to those 100 little things that you have to do right. Nobody's having those conversations with y'all. Gary is.
Self-insured.
And you're saying this makes sense now for under 100 employees?
Yeah, I would say we're seeing folks down to 50. It's probably the smallest that we're seeing folks do it. Again, it's going to come back to cash flow and risk tolerance. But a lot of that's mitigated by where you set the specific stop loss. So, an 80 life company is probably going to set their specific stop loss, $25,000, $30,000, something like that maybe. But we've got some that will say they're in a cash-rich business, and so maybe they're going to set it at 50. Because really what you got to think about is, what happens if I have 2 spec claims in 1 month? Can I afford $100,000 on top of my other claims and my admin fees, whereas in a fully insured world it would have just been $60,000? So as long as you feel comfortable from a cash flow standpoint, absolutely.
Gary, what happens in a year-end scenario? So like right now, we're fully insured, year-end, we're always talking about renewals, we're talking about 8 to 12% increases every year. How's that in the fully insured? Since you're taking all the risk, I assume it's level. We don't keep talking about changing prices for us, or?
Yeah, a lot of what happens in that environment is there's a lot more conversation around how do you want to manage the expenses of the plan, right?
Versus rearranging the deck chairs, going this carrier, this carrier, this carrier. you can't manage your cost unless you manage your claims. You know, you're rearranging, you're running from the,
Yeah, I mean, our self-insured clients renew on average at a lower trend than our fully insured clients, period, all day. But a lot of that then is just, you know, how do you manage the cost share with the employees? Because at the end of the day, you know, we help, but you know, you get to decide what you want to charge, right? And so, especially in the construction space, we have a lot of clients that will say, we're going to generate an internal invoice, and we're going to account for it separately because we got to justify our labor burden, right, or whatever else they need to do. And so they're generating an internal invoice. They're billing themselves. They're putting that money aside. They're running it all out of a separate bank account. So they don't have any problem saying, okay, this is what our expenses were. This is what our labor burden was, and this is how we're running it. And that makes it really clear.
In the time frame, is similar renewal or?
Yeah, you know, I would obviously the earlier the better, because there are going to be a lot of things that you want to put into place, right? You know, there are going to be 100 little check boxes that you want to make sure that you get, because you can be as detailed as you want, or you can sort of go with standard contract language. But you know, we want to try to do, you know, renewal meetings and open enrollment, educate everybody well in advance to get ID cards out. So you know, 120, 150 days. But the pricing of, you know, on a go-forward basis, the nice thing about it is, you know, today in a fully insured world, the carrier's got to get your renewal out 60 days in advance, right? We're getting our renewals on self-insured cases 120 days out.
yeah.
So, I mean, it is a good 2 months earlier than a fully insured renewal.
You're not only
And
getting your
data.
renewals way in advance, you're also getting a lot of data.
A lot of data.
So you'll see things like the percentage of your population that has diabetes, for example. You'll also know which ones of those or how many of those are taking their medicines and which ones are not. So you're going to be able to see a lot deeper dive on the data of where your risk is and how you might want to change your plan. So maybe you've got a lot of diabetics that aren't taking their meds because they're low-wage workers and they can't afford it. So maybe we change our plan at renewal to make the diabetic medicines cheaper so they can afford it. Now what you're doing is you're taking your out-of-control diabetics that are running to the ER and hospital stays, and you're giving them their meds for cheaper out of their pocket, and you're getting them in compliance. And the in-compliance diabetic is going to be 6 to 8 grand a year, and your out-of-control diabetic is going to be 50 grand a year. So just by making some of those plan changes from the visibility that you have in the data from being self-funded, you can really push and pull some of the levers in your plan.
Any other questions? I think we're coming up on time. Well, I just want to say thanks to David and to Michael. We've got a small gift here for you guys. So we've got some notebooks and some cards. So thanks for being here.
Thank you.
Yeah, we appreciate it. Yep, make sure. But guys, we'll follow up. Thanks for being here. We'll follow up with emails and the slides to everybody. We did record the session, so if you want to go back and master it and watch it again, feel free. If you want to pass it along to coworkers that weren't able to make it, feel free to do so. And we love your feedback, and we'll certainly keep you apprised as we continue to do these series. We do some of these on the property and casualty side as well throughout the year, so we'll continue to keep everybody posted. But we really appreciate you being here, and we look forward to staying in touch. Thank you.
Thank you.